They poisoned my rare crops, valued at $53,000, unaware that I was a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations with influential allies and diplomatic immunity. What would you do if a homeowners association's petty vendetta spiraled into an international incident? I never dreamed my retirement garden would ignite a global crisis. After 30 years serving my country abroad, I settled into my dream home in Oakwood Hills to cultivate exotic vegetables most people had never seen. These weren't ordinary plants. They were rare specimens worth over $50,000, gathered from remote villages worldwide. The trouble started one Tuesday afternoon as I watered my seedlings. A shadow crossed my garden beds. "Excuse me," came a crisp voice. "Those garden boxes violate our rules." I looked up to see Margaret Hensley by my fence, clutching her ever-present clipboard. Her silver earrings glinted as she scowled at my wooden planters. "Good afternoon, Margaret," I said, setting down my watering can. "These raised beds comply with Section 4.3 of the bylaws." I checked. Her eyes narrowed. "Maybe, but those strange plants are an eyesore. The HOA expects neat lawns, not these odd vegetables." I smiled, aiming for friendliness. "These are heritage varieties, some nearly extinct. I've been preserving them. That purple carrot's from Uzbekistan. It could aid farmers in arid zones. And that bean from Bolivia thrives in poor soil." Margaret wasn't swayed. She tapped her pen on her clipboard. "Ambassador Carter, I don't care if they're miracle plants from Mars. They're messy, and neighbors have complained." "Which neighbors?" I asked. She ignored me. "The board meets next Thursday. I'd fix this before then, or we'll act." As she left, my neighbor Paul waved sympathetically from his porch before stepping inside. That evening, while preparing for a UN meeting, my phone buzzed with Paul's text. "Watch out for Margaret. She forced me to dismantle my birdhouse last year, $900 in fines." I sighed, gazing at my garden in the dusk. These plants weren't a pastime. They were part of a UN biodiversity effort, studied for medicine and food security in climate-ravaged regions. The next morning, a notice was taped to my mailbox: "Violation, unapproved landscaping." It bore the signature of Richard Langston, HOA president. I decided to appeal directly, hoping they'd see the plant's value. Richard met me at the community center, a towering man with slick gray hair, uneasy as we shook hands. "Ambassador Carter, your career's impressive," he began. "But rules apply to all, no exceptions." I opened my laptop. "Richard, this isn't just a hobby." I showed photos of famine-stricken kids. "These plants are for a UN project to grow food in tough conditions. They could save lives." He shifted uncomfortably. "That's admirable, but quirky gardens hurt property values. The bylaws allow sustainability projects under Section 8.2, I countered. His jaw tightened. "The board decides." Margaret's logged multiple violations. As I walked home, my UN assistant called. "Ambassador, confirming the Secretary General's visit next week. He's eager to see the Heritage Crop Project." My stomach sank. "It's on, but we've got a local snag." That night, I saw Margaret and Richard inspecting my garden, snapping photos. Their intensity unnerved me. The next day, I flew to Brussels for an urgent meeting, leaving a security camera trained on my garden. Paul promised to watch it. "Those HOA tyrants weaponize rules," he warned. "Be careful." 3 days later, I landed back home to frantic messages from Paul. "Get here fast. Something awful happened to your garden." Racing to Oakwood Hills, I braced for a storm or vandalism. What I found was worse. Paul met me, grim-faced. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't stop them. They had official papers." My garden, 3 years of labor, was ruined. Plants drooped, discolored, the soil stinking of chemicals. My Uzbek purple carrots, Bolivian beans, and Burmese medicinal herbs, all dying. Kneeling, I touched wilted leaves of plants that had endured centuries, only to perish here. "Who did this?" I murmured. Paul handed me his phone, showing footage of Margaret and Richard, gloved and masked, spraying my garden with skull-labeled containers. "They said it was approved weed killer," Paul said, "but that's poison." I rose, brushing off dirt. "Do you realize what they've destroyed? These were humanity's heritage. Some exist nowhere else but distant villages." Rage replaced shock. The Secretary General was due tomorrow to see a now-dead garden linked to global food programs. "Send me that video," I said, voice steady. Paul nodded. What's your plan? I glanced at my ruined plants. I'll make a call, then teach Margaret and Richard about diplomacy. Sleepless, I saw my dying crops in my mind. By dawn, I'd strategized. I alerted UN security, briefed the Secretary General's office, and reread the HOA bylaws, not as a homeowner, but as a diplomat who'd faced tyrants. At 9 a.m., Margaret, Richard, and 2 board members arrived. Margaret's smile faded at my expression. Ambassador Carter, she chirped, we're glad you removed those ugly plants. I didn't let them in. I didn't remove anything. You trespassed and poisoned crops tied to a UN food security program. Richard stepped up. We sent notices. When you didn't comply, we acted per HOA rights. I played Paul's video. Their faces paled as they saw themselves dousing my garden. That's an invasion of privacy. Margaret snapped. No, entering my yard and destroying protected specimens. That's the invasion. Those were rare crops for humanitarian research. Richard blustered. The rules don't allow poisoning. I cut in. Section 8.2 exempts conservation projects, which my garden was. Margaret's face reddened. Your big job doesn't exempt you. A black SUV with diplomatic plates rolled up. My security chief, Sophia, stepped out. Everything okay, Ambassador? These are the ones who ruined UN property, I said. UN property? Richard sputtered. This is a suburb. I handed him papers. My garden's registered with the UN Seed Preservation Initiative. Those plants were for medical and food breakthroughs. Margaret skimmed them, frantic. How could we know? I told you, I said. But you wouldn't listen. Sophia spoke. The Secretary General's briefed. He wants an emergency HOA meeting this afternoon. Margaret gaped. The UN over plants? Over $53,000 in rare specimens for global food security, I corrected. Richard whispered to Margaret, panic evident. Look, he said, we'll pay $500 for the plants. I nearly laughed. The Uzbek carrot alone was $8,000, one of 3 in the West. Sophia's phone pinged. The Secretary General's team is at the airport. Media's alerted. Media? Margaret squeaked. Yes, I said. Destroying endangered species tied to aid projects is news. Richard pulled me aside. Can we settle this quietly? I eyed my ruined garden. Emergency meeting, 2 hours, full board, bring the bylaws. After they left, Paul brought a pot with a seedling he'd saved weeks earlier. Not sure what it is, he said. I nearly wept. It was a Himalayan medicinal herb, promising for cancer treatment. Paul, you might have saved lives, I said, cradling it. As I prepped for the meeting, neighbors gathered, sharing tales of Margaret and Richard's HOA tyranny. News vans arrived. This was no longer just my garden. It was about power abuse. At the community center, the crowd swelled. The Secretary General arrived, stern. Ambassador Carter, show me our plants. Sirens blared as diplomatic SUVs screeched up. I entered the HOA meeting. Margaret leapt up. What's this disruption? Poisoning my garden's a community matter, I said, especially since it's a UN sustainability project. Richard chuckled nervously. This entrance is overkill for vegetables. I showed before and after photos and the footage. Gasps erupted. You sent notices. Margaret yelled. An elderly woman stood. I got fined $200 for a flower box 2 inches too wide. But you poisoned his garden? Notices were about maintenance, not destruction of $53,000 in UN property, I replied. Richard faltered. You're really an ambassador? I laid out my credentials. The room exploded, neighbors shouting, Margaret banging her gavel. Your status doesn't exempt you. The Secretary General entered. Ambassador, are these the crops for drought resistance? Cameras flashed outside. Richard tried to eject the media. Paul countered. This is public per state law, revealing bylaws excluding plants under 3 feet from HOA control, hidden from new members. Margaret lunged for his papers. An FBI agent blocked Richard's exit. We've got questions about protected species. My phone buzzed. State Department. Treaty violations. Legal team en route. Paul whispered. I've tracked their selective enforcement for years. This is criminal. Margaret bolted, knocking over a neighbor, yelling about her car. Stop her, I said. No evidence deleted. The Secretary General murmured. This is beyond a neighborhood spat. Paul handed me a paper Margaret dropped, a condo plan from Richard's firm, my lot circled. Your garden's the key to their entrance, Paul said. Margaret returned, security trailing, her phone seized. It revealed photos of homes, violation notes, and texts plotting to oust residents. Neighbors erupted, fines for gnomes, clotheslines, bikes, while Margaret and Richard flouted rules. Paul projected a map of targeted homes, matching the condo blueprint. Financials showed $300,000 in unreported fines funneled to Richard's firm. The County Housing Authority and Financial Crimes Unit stepped in. Richard's firm was probed for months. Agents boxed records as neighbors formed groups, demanding the board's ouster. In my garden, security found planted deeds and a hit list with my name, evidence to frame me. Margaret's phone exposed surveillance of residents. The Secretary General cited treaty breaches. A tiny Himalayan poppy sprouted amid the poison, a survivor. The UN confirmed the toxin tied to Richard's company, alerting the EPA. Paul rushed over. Eleanor's garage, it's a front. The owner's name chilled me, a figure from my diplomatic past, raising security flags. Call Washington, I said. 3 months later, the FBI director briefed me. Richard laundered money for foreign entities near key sites. Margaret joined for profit. My surviving poppy yielded a compound to purify water in droughts. The HOA dissolved, a land trust formed. Neighbors rebuilt, media swarmed, and Congress probed HOA abuses. Spring brought thriving gardens and reforms. The Secretary of State summoned me. My plants now shaped climate talks. From poison grew resilience, justice, and hope.